Thanks for joining me for another video, everyone. So I thought I'd sort of continue along the same theme as before, and what I wanted to do was kind of talk about the ego and the kind of roles it plays in our lives. And just before I wanted to sort of talk about that, just establish what my interpretation of the ego actually is, because some people, one would say that the ego is like, oh, that guy's egotistical. In other words, he thinks a lot about himself. You know, someone with a big ego, you'd say, is like a arrogant or, you know, a bit of a know-it-all. Do you understand what I mean? That's generally how you would the ego would be used in language. The way I look at the ego, I see it as being the unobserved mind. So what, for instance, let's say there's somebody that is really feeling down about themselves, really feels sorry for himself. They have an equally big ego as someone who thinks that they're the greatest person in the world. It's two sides of the same coin, basically. So I think that's a good way of looking at it. So it's basically your mind and what your mind is doing, and you're not being aware of it. It's how you make snap judgments about things, about situations, about people. And the human ego is responsible for not all, but most of the pain and suffering that is on the planet, and the terrible state that most of the planet, or some of the planet, is in. It's the ego. I believe the roots of the ego were when we as a species developed a mind. So in other words, we were separated from the animals. It's mentioned in the Bible as being, I think it was, they ate of the tree. They ate the fruit of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. I think that's the passage in the Bible, referring to Adam and Eve, I believe. But so what that basically means is we were given the ability to think. And thinking, if you think about thinking, all you do is you are using memory to judge about a situation, and you are maybe looking into the future. The mind cannot exist within the present moment. It analyzes, it judges, you know, what does your mind do? What is it there for? It's there. We wouldn't be able to do the things that we do as human beings that separates us from the animals. Build things, you know, build sophisticated devices, communicate effectively like we do. Well, I say effectively. Generally, we don't. But you know, in your daily life, you couldn't function as an effective human without your mind. Because obviously you need to plan things, you need to figure out how you're going to eat and make, you know, what you're going to do at work, things like that. But when your ego starts to take over your life, that's when dysfunction sets in. So, you know, it will start to. It's just in everyday situations. When you're talking to people and your mind will be wandering instead of not really listening to what they're saying, and when that happens, you might build your own interpretation of what they're saying, which isn't really the truth. So it's kind of recognizing what it is. And some might say, well, what good would it do? Well, your ego is really an illusion. so judging people is a great one, because as the biggest sort of challenge that we have as humans is other people. That's the If it wasn't for other people and how they annoy you or create challenges for you, life would be very, very simple, wouldn't it? If people were very easy to deal with, but people aren't. People differ. People generally are unconscious, and people are run by their egos. Egos can also have certainly an effect with regard to, thinking you're great, and you might deal with people who come across as obnoxious and a bit self-centered, and of course it is their ego. They believe they are better than other people, which is ridiculous. Some people might be born with certain gifts. They might be good looking, they might have a certain talent, and then they will believe that they're better than other people, and they might look down on others. But ultimately we're all pretty much part of the same thing. Life generally can be easier for some people than it can for others from a certain perspective, but there is a reason behind all of that. We're not here by accident. We are here for a purpose. I've been reading, I don't want to go into this too much, because basically I've been reading a book that suggests, and I think the books are great, that says, every person that is here that has like a disability or what might be perceived as an incredibly challenging existence, here because they've chosen to be here. They have come to this lifetime or this existence to go through those challenging situations because they want to grow. And obviously there'll be extreme examples that you see. Well, how could anybody possibly choose such a circumstance? And of course, in some cases it would be very difficult to understand that, and that's why I don't want to go into it too much, because that's something you don't need to understand why we're all here. You just need to understand that we are, and there is a greater purpose for the universe. How could there not be? You look at something as ridiculously complex and wondrous as the universe and suggest that it is just a random mess. I mean, that's just ludicrous to me. But getting back to people who have very big egos, from one perspective it can be make things slightly more easier if you think you are great than if you're not. Certainly you're going to have a more positive, a slightly easier time in life, there's no doubt about that. But certainly your ego is just as much at work if you're sat there feeling sorry for yourself, and you might say, well, some people should be feeling sorry for themselves. Well, I don't think that feeling sorry for yourself in any situation is ever positive. You certainly have a right to, if you want to say a right, you certainly, emotions, feeling pain and suffering are things that we inevitably have to go through as human beings at this stage of our evolution. But certainly building a victim identity of what you're going through in life can't really ever be positive. So those people, the ones that really struggle in that, well, not necessarily struggle, but the ones that continuously don't look happy, and they'll be telling themselves stories in their head, and their ego will be saying, bad things always happen to you, things like that. And the other person at the other end of the scale who's feeling great will be thinking, I'm fantastic, I'm such a great guy. And it, like I said, it's two sides of the same coin, really. So if you look at how it affects our daily life, at work, for instance, let's say that there's a person who you really don't like, your mind and your ego will start saying, I hate that person and I shouldn't be in this situation and he's a complete jerk or whatever, and you're making all these judgments. You've no idea what that guy's been through. And that's your ego at work, isn't it? Making all these stories up, making all these judgments, maybe giving yourself a bit of a victim mentality, because how could you be in such a situation when obviously what that will do is complicate the matters. I do it. It's people that I don't want anything to do with, and I sometimes find myself saying to myself, that guy's a dick, when I know I shouldn't. It might be true that they may be obnoxious, they may have a big ego, but they are living their life as best as they know how, and no one has any right or any right to say otherwise. If they're personally affecting your life, you deal with the situation. I mean, just a kind of example, there's a couple that are near, a couple of friends of mine that live only a few houses away, and the girl, they're a married couple and they have a little girl, and the girl, she's like similar age to me, and I've known her since I moved to my area, and we were very close. We used to go to work together every day, and we just get on very well. We have a lot in common, and she's such a lovely person. She's such a lovely person, and she is going out with a guy who at heart is a really nice guy. He means nobody any harm. However, he has, and this isn't a judgment, this is a fact, he has quite a big ego in that he is very self-centered. But I do have a degree of time for him because he's a nice guy. He genuinely has a heart. However, there is another side to that. It's a shame because I used to go around there quite a lot, but it got to the point with the guy where I wasn't enjoying his company at all, because what he does is, all he does is talk about himself all the time. Everything is about him. He wants to tell you every detail that happened to himself at work that day. When you try and speak and tell you something that maybe has happened to you, he's just not interested. He talks over you. I mean, it sounds like he's painting a really bad picture. He's not quite that bad, but he does occasionally listen. But all he wants to do is kind of stamp his own authority on every situation. It's always a one-way conversation. It's always him talking about how great, not necessarily how great he is, but you know what he did at work and how he did well and how he knows lots of other things, and he just goes on and on and on, and he won't let you get a word in edgeways. And it got to the point a few years ago where I had to distance myself from them. I stopped going round, and I still said hello and text them every now and again. And you know, it's a shame, but sometimes when you recognise that, you have to say, I'm not going to, that is going to have, if I carried on to be quite close friends with him, it would have a negative effect on my life, because I can't have a fruitful, I can't enjoy myself, I can't have what I consider to be an enjoyable conversation. It isn't a conversation, it's a one-way thing. I can't communicate effectively with him. So what's the point? And it's kind of recognising that's where he is. He's living his life. He's got a good life. He's got a great missus, a lovely little daughter, a nice house. So he's obviously doing something right. So I'm not judging him and saying he's a bastard or whatever. So I had to remove myself from the situation, and I did it. And I'm just sort of using this as an example because this is the roles, this is some of the situations it causes in our lives and how I've dealt with it. So, you know, it's been quite a while, and every so often I'll text the guy and he'll come out let's just call him Jack, shall we? So Jack comes out. He came out like a year ago when the football was on, and I watched it with him. And every so often I'll bump into him, and I'll be polite, but I won't. I basically said to myself, because of how uncomfortable and unenjoyable I find spending time with him, I have to distance myself. Now, the other day it was his 50th birthday, and it was on Facebook and all that, and I just thought I'll go round and give him a 50th birthday card after work. It was a little bit late at night, and basically I went round there against my better judgment, because I can't. But I thought, it's his 50th birthday. You know, it's the least I can do. And I do like the guy. I have nothing against him. It's like I said, it's just not how I want to spend my time. So I took his birthday card round, and his missus was asleep upstairs. It was like 10:30 at night. And I must admit, I started to forget the reasons why. At that point, this is why I'm using this example, because it's a recent thing. I started to forget the reasons why I had to distance myself. And I remember thinking, because I can see the house from my window, and I remember thinking a few times over the last few months, why have you not been over there? Why have you kept yourself kind of away? And I kind of forgot how difficult Jack was to deal with. So when I went round there to give him his birthday card, he was like, "Oh, thank you very much for that." He was very gracious in the card. I think he was a little bit surprised. He went to the kitchen, he'd got me beer out of the fridge, and we had a beer, and I was there for about 25 minutes, and for 25 minutes I don't think I got one. I think the only thing I managed to say about my own life was say that I actually have recently bought a new kettle, and that wasn't because I'm like a boring bugger in conversation, but he was started going on about how he has like a special water filter in his fridge and all this, and I said, "Oh, I've got one in my kettle," and "Oh, have you? Oh, you've got a posh kettle." That's what it was. So for 25 minutes, it was just him talking. You know, he'd not seen me in such a long time. He knows I've had a lot going on with work. Didn't ask me any questions, so he's like no interest really. He does have an interest. This is the thing. I understand him quite well. He has an interest, but his ego is that running amok that all he wants to do is ingratiate himself, and it stems down really from an insecurity, I believe, because if you have a need to overshadow yourself, if your ego consistently wants to show itself to other people, it's usually because, in 99% of cases, because there's an insecurity behind it. If you have true strength and confidence comes from a deep place, and you wouldn't have any need to impose yourself on other people, because you would feel content within yourself. So that's why I have time for him. But obviously at that point, this was only like 2 days ago, I remembered fully why I'd not been round, and I had to distance myself, and it just made me think, well, you know, you made the right decision. You know, I was kind of thinking, well, you know, maybe it's just something I had to do. And I remember it was his birthday that day, and I said, "Oh, I'm in the local pub, the local bar. There's one round the corner." I said, "I'll be in there for a little while on Friday night. Maybe I'll see you in there if you want to nip in." So then, only last night I was on my way to a housewarming party, and I was going to be there at 8 o'clock. And he sent me a message on Facebook, but it wasn't a message, a private message. He sent me a post, but not only was it like a post, one of them normal one-worded, it was like a full picture. Have you noticed how people have started putting comments in pictures to make it look even bigger? And I was like, well, I mean, I'll probably do a full video on Facebook and the pitfalls of it, but that was a bit like, I don't understand why it had to be in a public forum. And it was, "Are you out tonight like you said?" was the question. And I don't believe I said it was all night anyway. I said I'd be out for a little bit, so I said, I think I replied in the comment section underneath, because it was a photograph which I just don't get at all. I don't understand why everybody has to see my business. And I said, yeah, I'll be out for half an hour. And then his missus replied and said, what do you mean only half an hour? 5 question marks. And I remember thinking, hang on a minute, what's kind of going on here? Now, at that moment in time, my mind started running amok thinking, is she being funny with me for whatever reason, because I'm only going out for half an hour, because she wants Jack to have a nice time when he might feel isolated. I happen to know he doesn't have a huge amount of friends, and everybody that I speak to has the same issues with him. So it could be that she's getting insecure because he feels left out. But that isn't my problem. And it might sound harsh, but I've got to... There is nothing wrong with looking after your own interests primarily in certain situations. At the end of the day, you can't have a positive effect on the world if you are deeply miserable inside and your own needs are not being satisfied. But that doesn't mean you can't be generous. However, so at that point, I thought, right, okay, I don't think that she should be sticking her nose in. That's what my ego started saying. I'm like, I've, you know, at the end of the day, I'm going out. I've got other things to do. So I simply replied to him by text message and said, I'm in the bar shortly. If you want to come in, I'll be in for a little while. I'm having 2 drinks and then I'm leaving. I've got somewhere else to go. And then he replied on Facebook. And then everybody else started, you know, some of my other friends started going, oh, he's just making excuses. And it all got a bit silly. And he ended up just... turning off the post so I couldn't see what had happened anymore. And God knows what was written on. But if I'd have let my ego get the better of me in that situation, all hell could have broke loose. I could have, for all I know, they could have fell out with me now because I was only in there for half an hour. I've no idea. I've not spoke to them directly since. I got a message from Jack later on in the night saying, oh, there's no point in me coming in now. And I just didn't want to, you know, at the end of the day, I have to separate myself from that situation. When very easily it could have turned into a slanging match on Facebook. So, I believe that there's a couple of egos involved there. It could just be my misinterpretation of it. But the reason that I don't want to get involved, I don't want to start, you know, saying, well, he only said half an hour and all that kind of thing, and saying to the girl, well, you know, why did you get involved? What's the point? What is the purpose? Because all that will do is create pointless conflict. At the end of the day, I've acted with integrity. But what kind of was interesting, and the reason I brought it up was, I just wanted to do something nice for someone. And it ended up like backfiring on me a little bit, in that I was stood talking to some friends at the bar when I was getting text messages from Jack. I was getting messages on Facebook questioning where I am, asking me why I'm only staying out for 2 drinks and I'm only in for half an hour when I said it'd be longer, when I never actually did. So all these things were spinning out of control. No doubt, well, I say no doubt, but there is a possibility they said, well, he's out of order there, Andy. Obviously, I didn't do anything at all wrong. But that's how, I think that's just a kind of example of the kind of the roles that egos play and how it can misinterpret situations. For instance, Jack could have said to his missus, oh, Andy said he'd be in all night and he'd have a drink with me. He could have genuinely made a mistake and thought I said that. But of course, really, let's look at it from the other side. If there was someone, let's say that Jack's missus was an enlightened master, she'd say, well, he's got a right to do whatever he wants. Maybe he misheard what he said. It was really nice of him to come round with that card, wasn't it? Because, you know, I don't think such and such a body did a thing. You know, when he came after work and all that, he was obviously tired because he'd been working 10 hours. Yeah, we really appreciate that. But no, all I seemed to get was a little bit of sort of, I mean, it wasn't nasty, but I felt a little bit not invaded. It sounds a bit dramatic, that, because it was just a few questions and a few text messages. But I was looking forward to that evening. I was in the bar talking to some friends, and I've just bought some new clothes, so I was kind of wearing those. And one of my failings, if you want to call it a failing, is I love clothes. I love to buy new clothes. I just like clothes. So, you know, it's kind of like one of my mates said, "Oh, that's a nice top," and I was like, "Yeah, I bought it from such a thing. Have a look, and why don't you buy it, etc., etc." It's vanity. I'm fully aware of it, but I do like my clothes, and so I was having a nice time. I was chatting with people, and then suddenly I was getting comments and messages about, what are you doing in there, and how long are you going to be in? And I was like, well, it's nobody else's business. I was like feeling uncomfortable, and it kind of reinforced the point of the fact that I was kind of, it was like I look into things deeply, and sometimes maybe a bit too deeply. You see, that couple are moving away to a different area, and I remember when I found out a few weeks ago, and I felt a little bad, because I thought I really should have made more an effort with them over the last few years, because we've kind of drifted apart. But it kind of reinforced my belief that I've done the right thing, because I tried my best to get on with Jack over the years, and we've had a couple of minor run-ins, and I kind of made the right judgment. I would not have been able to have any kind of fruitful ongoing friendship with him, because it just wouldn't have worked. And it just kind of made me think, well, you made the right decision. It's not your fault you're moving away. You've been courteous, you've been nice. I have reacted to things he said in the past, and I've learned from it, hopefully. So I'm not totally innocent in it. But yeah, it was just a kind of example of how these things can... It's just typical human relationships, isn't it? And it's magnified and by Facebook. I mean, why on earth that needed to be brought in? And every Tom, Dick and Harry's having a few words, and there were people commenting, and I was like, well, why can you not text me, man? Why does it have to go on Facebook? The only reason I'm on there is there's certain friends that I communicate with that I'd probably lose contact with if it wasn't for Facebook. I should probably. And on the whole, this will be a video for another time, but Facebook can be as good as it can be bad. It really depends, of course. So yeah, that's just one example. I think that tale lasted a bit longer than I wanted it to, but I hope it was a good example. But the ego's a very complicated tool, or device, if you want to call it that. I'm going to do several videos about it. This is just kind of a brief introduction to how I understand it. And it's kind of way I try and look at it. I think I'm quite good at spotting it in people. My ego is it's certainly not dead. There's no doubt about that. I'm not an enlightened master, but I think I've got quite good at understanding what it is and when it's started to take grip of me. And there's been many occasions where I found myself getting overrun by my ego, and I've managed to drag myself back. And it's kind of like when you're talking before you really had chance to not think about it, but your mind runs away with you sometimes. When gossiping, that's a great one. When you can't wait to tell someone something because you think that you're telling them something that they don't know, and little things like that. So yeah, I just wanted to have a sort of quick introduction. I'm going to be making more videos on this. Because generally I like to keep my videos to around about 30 minutes for the minute. So what I'm going to do, this will just be like part 1. So if anybody enjoys this video, just let me know. Just do me a favour, guys, because obviously this channel, I've only set this channel up for a week. Could you just, if you've enjoyed it, of course, could you just like it, and if possible share my video, if possible, just to see if I can get the channel to grow. Of course, only if you've enjoyed it. I wouldn't ask you to share something that you didn't. So any feedback would be appreciated, guys. Like I said, it was just a quick introduction to hopefully a series of videos that I'm going to do. So I'm going to leave it there, and I hope you have a great day, and I'll speak to you soon.